All right. Hey, this is Jonathan Kirsting hanging out with Jason McKenna on Emerge, where tech and education connect.
How you doing, Jonathan?
Not too bad, man. It's been a few months actually since we last hung out to continue the conversations around all fun things around STEM and continuous education and all that kind of fun stuff.
Looking forward to having this conversation today.
I know. You find the coolest people to bring into the studio. So I'm relying on you, Jason. This is your project to make these things happen.
This is true. I do find some cool people.
Exactly. And I have to remind anyone listening to this podcast that it wouldn't happen without Huntington Bank. They sponsor our podcast studio here at the Tech Vibe Radio podcast studio, the Huntington Bank Tech Vibe Radio podcast studio. To get it more correctly, go to huntington.com and learn all about them. Got to pay the bills first, as far as that goes, before we can have these awesome conversations.
That's right.
So how much fun is it, Jason, that we get to have these conversations? We get to stretch it out a little bit.
We do. We do get to stretch it out. It's a lot of fun. And the connection, like we always talk about, between STEM education, kind of what we do at RoboMatter, and also things like product development. And, at RoboMatter, we're trying to teach students how to, become the innovators of tomorrow, but talking about how innovation is done today. That's a really interesting thing.
Right, absolutely. So RoboMatter, real quickly, just so in case anyone who's just listening to this for the first time, what is the overview of RoboMatter? What is RoboMatter doing these days?
At RoboMatter, we try to create STEM education solutions to prepare students, really kindergarten through 12th grade, to learn more about computer science, robotics, engineering, computational thinking, really those 21st century skills that all students are going to need in order to become creators in the 21st century economy. So we create the tools, we train the teachers, and do all those types of things, once again, to prepare students to go on and be with the creators and innovators in a knowledge-based economy.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what. The guest we're going to introduce, this is a man of my heart, because this is actually, I think, the first time in my more than a decade of doing interviews brought a loaf of bread.
Yes.
I'm just saying that right now. If someone brings a loaf of sourdough bread, they're totally cool.
Freshly baked.
Freshly baked, nonetheless. So we have John Davis here. John, thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Jason.
All I got to do is find some really good butter to go with that bread, and I'm going to be so happy.
Oh, no butter needed. No butter
I was going to say, it's probably so good. Who needs the butter? So, John, first off, what is your background? What do you do? And we're going to tee up what you're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, so I help organizations leverage what we call agile ways of working.
Right.
So it's large companies, it's small startups, it's even working at the university to help companies understand how to come together in a different way, to be more responsive to their customers, to be more resilient in the work they take on, the risks they take on, almost be more entrepreneurial. And that's the hard work, is helping them make a shift from the traditional ways that they work.
And what's your background, man? Like, I'm assuming you teach this stuff, right?
Well, so it started as a software developer. Worked at a startup or two. It was at Free Markets. Free Markets was a success here in Pittsburgh at one point, so a lot of folks know it.
I love the free market days. That's all
It was fun.
Say.
I was there for about 5 years, kind of ran with the same people even today, stay in touch with them. There's some fabulous people.
I interviewed Glenn Meekum when he hired his 30th employee at Free Markets. I think he was taking on the second floor of the building he was in, and it was like I think it was about a good 6-7 months before the whole IPO thing, and
he's
things went really crazy.
He's really cool.
That's why I think about those days when there were companies just doing crazy stuff like that.
Yeah,
that's cool. You were part of that ride.
Yeah, it was like between 125 and 150. We were over at I think the 21st and 22nd floor. They just pulled that together. It was still under construction when I joined.
So how'd you guys connect? How did you and Jason come together for him to invite you on our Emerge podcast here?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. When I first got hired at RoboMatter, I actually got hired to do teacher professional development. And I did that for a little while. And I was doing that for about a month or two. I was a full-time teacher. I worked part-time. Then I came on full-time to do that. And then they were like, hey, Jason, we need you to head up our product development. And, being a teacher, I had no idea really what that meant. I don't have a business background. I certainly don't have a business degree. So I got started doing that, and I never felt like I was what we were doing, I was really getting enough out of our employees. We have a lot of brilliant folks at RoboMatter, whether they're cognitive scientists, software engineers, John, like your previous career, artists, and I just never felt like, we were really tapping into our full potential. And we were at a management meeting, and at the management meeting, someone brought up this idea of a user story. And Skip Smith, who was our president at the time, brilliant guy, kind of stopped everything and said, wait a minute, A user story, to me, has a very specific definition, and I don't think you're using it with the definition that I'm familiar with. And Skip went on this like 15-minute soliloquy about what a user story was. So I was intrigued by this. I went and I Googled it. I spent the weekend reading about it. I had my one-on-one with Skip on Monday. And I said, I was reading about this stuff with a user story, and they talked about this agile product development. And my 15-minute one-on-one with Skip lasted 3 hours. If you Skip, you would like be falling out of your chair right now, because this is a guy that if you have a 15-minute meeting, you're normally done in 14 minutes. We talked for 3 hours about this. Took me to the website. I read the Agile. He read the Agile Manifesto aloud to me, right? Yeah. Talked about, this is on the phone, mind you, too. So I said, I really want to do this. I want to do this product development this way. He's like, great. Now, unbeknownst to me, Skip had led about 4 different companies through an Agile transformation. And that's kind of how I got started. And one of the people that we had working for us knew John and was like, hey, as we kind of go through this transformation, I think it'd be great if you met my buddy, John Davis, who worked with you at Free Markets. And that's how I met John, and really kind of taught me a ton, taught our employees a ton, did a training with our employees about the whole thing. And what I think is really fascinating about this is that when you think about products, people being consumers, all of us, our demands for products now are a lot different than they were 10 years ago. I would argue 10 years ago, we were just happy if something worked.
Now it's got to be just totally customized to what your needs are.
Intuitive.
Exactly.
It has to, if you have to think about, I give the example all the time. A year ago, I bought my mother an iPad for her birthday, a new one. She had one previously. It took me like 10 minutes to get her up and running with that thing. So now, like if someone buys our stuff, like they got to get up and running in like 10 minutes. That's like the standard now. So how do we actually achieve that? And how do we create products that do that? The answer to that question, what a lot of companies are doing right now, is they're doing this thing called Agile.
Bringing Agile into it, and that's where John comes in.
But a lot of people don't know what that is.
And now John's going to tell us.
There's some confusion out there, too. There's this Agile space that everybody talks about, but then they hear about other things like Scrum or Kanban or other frameworks or methodologies.
Lean product development,
extreme programming. There's a bunch of them. So the origins, let's maybe talk about the origins. You could go back to '93 when Dr. Jeff Sutherland put together, coming out of his deep military experience. He was a reconnaissance fighter pilot in Nam. He went on to do some amazing things with radiology. He was a doctor. Radiology obviously got into GE Healthcare and did some work with them as their CTO with a company that he had that was acquired. And you can read their books and learn the stories of all the players that I could talk about now, but to go deeper on the stories. But he basically started working with a large bank and was working with them. He took on a pretty big challenge that he'll talk about. You can Google it and just listen to his story firsthand. It's pretty powerful. But it was about taking on some of the headaches, and it was going to be, let's get management out of the way, right, which could be controversial in the day because we had a lot of command and control style management.
That's what it was all about, was having someone call the shots and people then execute on it, right?
We built very large organizations to control quality, to control scope, right? So we built these siloed organizations, and he said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it with cross-functional teams. We're going to share commitment to goals. Right, we're going to get real about impediments and get those impediments out of the path of those teams. That's the job of leadership. And what we'll do is bring forward, at least every month, we'll bring forward working product, working systems at the bank, and engage the stakeholders in real issues that we're facing, also in real tangible results that we're making incremental progress on. And that was in '93, formalized it with Ken Schwaber in '95, and called it Scrum. They defined it as Scrum.
It's so funny when you say '93, I'm thinking like, oh, that was just a few years ago. But no, this was like 25 years ago.
Sure,
so that's how long this has kind of been building to where it is now.
Yeah, and he even got his ideas. If you go back to earlier to '86, there were two management thinkers at the time, Takeuchi and Nonaka. They essentially were the management thinkers at the time. They wrote an article with the Harvard Business Review called The New Product Development Game. It wasn't so much about software as it was product development and the competitive nature and all the complexity of the world with technology coming to bear and large complex organizations and markets coming together in unpredictable ways. So how can you survive that? How can you compete in that environment? So they actually talked about the elements that are now part of Scrum. But that was all rooted in lean manufacturing and Toyota Production System stuff. So the roots go back pretty far, pretty deep.
The thing about Toyota is what I always thought is fascinating, because you had a company that knew it couldn't compete with GM in terms of dollars.
Yeah.
So they knew essentially that their goal was we had to outthink them.
Yeah.
And I was in Malaysia, and I was on a panel, and we were talking about education. And I was with it was a GM. I don't remember his exact title, but he worked for Toyota. He was pretty high up the chain in Toyota. And he talked about the fact that we have a guy, he could be working on the assembly line, and he can be working on that assembly line for 5 years. He goes, I'm going to pull that guy in my office. I'm going to say, you know that better than anyone. You certainly know it better than I do. And if you can't give me 3 ways to make it efficient and better and higher quality, then you can't be here. You can't work here.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to go find somebody that can do it that way. And that was the kind of organizationally the culture that they try to cultivate there. Whereas I'm not just executing, but I'm always thinking both strategically and tactically as I go through and I try to create these working increments of product as we go through here.
Yeah, my wife does a lot of work with organizations around the cultural side of things, so maybe I don't want to talk too much about that, just getting out of my own strengths. But I think the cultural aspect of agile transformation or adopting something specific like Scrum, leaders have to believe that there's greater power, greater innovation that can come with empowering teams, decentralizing authority, decision making to the teams.
It seems totally obvious to me that that's what you would want to do, but I guess obviously old mindsets were not like that. It was very just top down, right?
Yeah.
But so obviously, so this facilitates that. Tell our listeners, how this actually gets those juices flowing and gets the best minds.
Yeah, I mean, you have some stories of your own maybe you want to share, Jason, but I think it's about the creativity that you're unlocking in people. So if you have a diverse set of ideas and diverse thinking, because you've got what we call a cross-functional team, or in some companies, cross-departmental teams, right? You have people in operations, technology, sales, marketing. They're coming together on teams to solve business problems together. You're leveraging the intelligence of the people who are out there at the customer connection, facing the customer, not the organization 3 levels up. So management has made that shift, but what you're then giving those people are just amazing opportunities to come forward with innovative ideas about changing the way we work, becoming more effective in our product lines or our service lines. Yeah,
I think the key thing, like if you really want to try to kind of boil it down, before and if you talk about like Jonathan was mentioning, you had a command and control kind of structure before. You had management coming up with the requirements list. That they would then hand off to whether it was software designers or product people to say, go ahead and go execute this. And kind of now what you're looking at, it's a couple different things. It's like, number one, the people closest to the customer are the ones whose insights are the most valuable. So if I'm, kind of in my ivory tower, so to speak, or if I'm in management and we're working on strategy, whatever, I'm normally not talking to the customer.
We can't just tell them what they want.
Yeah.
Come on, man. You're going to like this product, we swear.
Exactly. So, and then the other part of that, you bring up a very good point, Jonathan. The other part of that is humility, right? Because we really don't know how the customer is going to use the product.
Yeah.
We think we know how the customer is going to use the product, but we really don't know how the customer is going to use the product. The only way that we can really know that is by going out and watching them, observing them, and seeing how they're actually using the product. So once you kind of understand that, in the old days of product development, it would take you 9 months to a year to actually get something the customer could use.
And then people are going to change it.
And people have a right to change their mind.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
In this day and age, a year you're left dead in the water.
Exactly.
So using this methodology now allows you to perform this much quicker and get to market faster.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, you want, maybe as an entrepreneur, whether you're in a large company with multiple products, you're trying to bring out a new product, or you're a startup and you're just trying to get your flagship product to market, unvalidated assumptions, right? I'm assuming a lot about my users and customers. Why would I not want to involve them in the design and shape of it and validate as we make incremental progress to building features and functionality, get it in front of them and get their real feedback on it because we can adjust. And if you do that iterative incremental approach, that's where a lot of the agile principles are start to put into action. You're translating that into real business value.
Now, is this something that, I'm assuming a company of any size, you don't have to be a multinational company to implement this. There are levels that you can bring this on. So if I'm a 3-person shop, I can use some of these kind of key ways of going about business, or am I mistaken on?
Yeah, I think
scale?
The principles scale up, scale down, right? I think maybe if you're the CTO and founder of the technology and the CEO and part investor, they got some angel funding. They can apply a lot of these principles without a lot of formality.
Just to kind of start getting in the ballpark with it, and
Absolutely.
Get the mindset there more than anything, right?
The bigger companies, right? When you get into multiple lines of business, multi-billion-dollar corporations, we've helped a lot of the Fortune companies go through this training where it's experiential learning, and we probably want to get into some of the how do we learn about these things, but the experiential learning to say we've never really worked in teams before, so we're not sure exactly what to do, let alone we've never led this kind of change in our organization and this kind of culture work that goes with it. So we help those folks, and they learn by doing, right? So start small, build on your successes. There's 10,000 different approaches to rolling this out to the global Fortune companies, but fundamentally, it's about starting small and building on your success.
I think software plays a big part of that, right? Because 20, 30 years ago, if I had an idea for something, oftentimes that idea was going to be delivered in a box, right? Mm-hmm. And that box had to be delivered somewhere and had to go on a shelf somewhere. So there was a lot of logistics or a lot of impediments in between my idea and getting that idea into the hands of a customer. Now, I can get a website, I can get a URL, throw it online, and boom, there it is. So, to your point, Jonathan, I think that's a great one. In terms of startups, oftentimes, if I'm a startup, the reason it's a forcing function for me to have incremental progress, to have incremental working software, right? Because I might get funded, and I have to show whoever's funding me, like in a short period of time, hey, look, I have something working.
I'm not wasting your money, I swear.
Please give me more money. Give me my money for another 2 weeks. Then I get money for another 2 weeks. And then we make something at the end of that 2 weeks. And that's kind of, now I obviously don't have 9 months to justify having that money come in. So I think what's really interesting is how it kind of started, this was something that was adopted by a lot of very small companies, very, very small companies and startups. But now you see the big companies that do want to become more entrepreneurial because they say, how do we not get disrupted by innovation? Because that's what they're afraid of.
They got to start thinking at the smaller level to be more nimble again. And I guess as you get bigger, you clog it up.
So let's talk about that, John. So how do you, let's take it from both ends. First, how would you go in a big company and try, and like what is that process like to train people, just like the logistics of actual I got not the cultural thing, but just like I got a bunch of people in a room and we're gonna get them ready to change how they develop a product. So you have it from that angle, but then also from more of like the classroom angle and the stuff that you do from a teaching standpoint now.
Remind me to come back to
those
2 points.
Don't worry.
I'll make sure you get to that second one because I want to know about that specifically.
Iterative and incremental.
Exactly.
So, I think with the big companies, I could tell you, I work for a single source property right now, and they effectively, the way we got started, they're a big company, private. They've got lots of product lines, and it's sort of it's their mission to unlock the door to home ownership, promote and preserve the vitality of neighborhoods. That's their greater goal. So we've got these various product lines that service lots of customers. These are large, publicly traded companies that are their customers, and they've got lots of vendors who they integrate with that delivers the service. So we started out with how do we get the technology teams up and running. So coincidentally, I worked at Free Markets as a developer and CubeMate with Matthew Beck. He's their chief technology officer. He brought me in hearing the kind of work we've been doing to help companies, and we trained their team. So we got into a professional Scrum Foundations class I'm licensed by Scrum.org to teach those classes. So, we basically got 20 people in a room. We had them break into small cross-functional teams. And we just, over the course of a couple of days, got them equipped with learning enough about the Scrum framework through practical application of it. So we'll talk a little bit about how we teach people how to learn, but I think that's really important is we change how we teach people to learn.
Can people be somewhat skeptical at first, and then you kind of see
sure.
their mindsets changing as they go through the process?
Absolutely, because people come from different points of view, right? So you don't know where they come from with experience. They may have worked in a traditional way and been very successful, and they're now an employee at a company and feel that they're not doing anything wrong. Like, why fix something if it's not broken? Leadership may want it because of the pursuit of innovation or resiliency or responsiveness to customers. And the way that we're, quote unquote, organized as a company may not be in service to those things. But from an employee's point of view, we may be fine. I don't get it. So you help people through that change. Yeah. It's a journey, right?
Sense, absolutely.
And the leaders, too, right? They may feel that their SLAs for their department are very high. Their service indicators are that we serve the customers internally and externally very well. But if it doesn't deliver on the greater goal of the company, and we're not sharing goals and true leadership, that's shared leadership model, we may not really be in service to the customer as much as we are to our department, right? So those are the kinds of things we help them discover connections with and sort out, for themselves. They have to go through the change themselves.
It's normally about like 2 to 3 days that you would do like a typical training when you would go into a company.
Yeah, and then some coaching to get them comfortable with storytelling, right? For one, to say, oh, yep, you're encountering this. Lots of folks are. So I know lots of Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, consultants in the Pittsburgh area. They're fantastic people. You name the company, we probably know 1 or 2 people at those companies helping those companies go through the exact things we're talking about here. So I don't have to be the expert. There's a huge population of people helping people on that journey. Some of those folks are becoming leaders in those companies to actually provide that leadership instead of coaching and developing that leadership, right? So you have folks like Jason sitting across the table. He is one of those kinds of leaders. He makes it okay to arrange ourselves differently and try these things and adapt as we go to try to find, through continuous improvement, a better result for our business, for our product innovation. So I guess back to how do the big companies get started? We do that 2 or 3 days worth of training. We coach and consult along the way. We get help, advice, but really it's what I like to call empiricism, right? You won't know until you try things, and as you try things emerge, and you can inspect and adapt.
So you probably start discovering so many things along the way
about who you are, about the capability of the team,
right? Yeah. Right, and then things start gelling.
It's awesome.
There. Yeah, no, it's got to be seriously transformative to a company when they start seeing that come together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, it's to kind of connect to education for a second. It's very analogous to what you see in education right now in terms of things like computer science education. So what do we do for computer science education right now? Guys like me come to a school and say, okay, I'm going to train your teachers for 2 or 3 days and teach them how to teach students how to program. Why is that? Because most of them, don't have a computer science degree.
Yeah.
They're not used to, it's a different way of teaching because the first answer is never the right answer when you go to make a program. So oftentimes, most people have been taught the first answer in math class better be the right answer, right? So you got to overcome that hurdle.
Yes.
But you have to go through all of that. So now, what we're trying to do from an education standpoint is, what if we train the pre-service teachers before they became teachers, in order to kind of get ahead of this?
Yeah, you got to get it in their mind ahead
exactly.
of time. Yeah,
and that was my second part of the question.
Right.
So you're attacking it from both ends, both at a corporate level from big companies, but also with what you do in college classrooms. Yeah.
Yeah. So at Carnegie Mellon in Heinz School, I had the privilege of creating a class with one of the deans there, and we put that together about 5 years ago. And it started off, first version of the class, never been in the classroom like that.
Did you apply your methodology to creating the class?
I did.
Yes.
It's like self-referencing. Yeah, it was crazy. Really embarrassingly bad the first time I did it. And some of the people that are there that I remember who were there, one of the fellows was through the Army War College, and he's a fellow with them, and he was hosting like I think it was a 3 or 4-star general for dinner that evening.
Okay.
In town. So there's like a lot of pressure with the caliber of folks in that classroom.
Absolutely.
But it taught me what I need to do to reach their level. What was important to them, I had to discover that because there was no way to know that. Just teaching the class is one thing, but trying to connect with your students and understand what's important to them in their career endeavors. So we over 5 years have improved that class. It's now a required elective. It's called Agile Methods. But
love it. That's so cool. It's required.
Oh, it's fantastic,
yeah.
Right? So we have like 55 students there on a regular basis every 8 weeks.
And you were telling me you have a bit of a waiting list for this as well, too, right?
We had about 40 consistently, but we spiked to 80 this last semester.
Wow.
New problems to solve. These are good problems. It's in high demand.
Right, if that's not saying something about the relevancy of this.
It's very relevant, I think, to, when you talk with the students, they talk about the interviews. Every interview they go on, they're being asked, do you have experience with this? Do you know what these things mean? Tell me your stories. Tell me your experience. So they get practical application in the classroom.
I've done that. We were in the process of hiring some new folks at RoboMatter. So, me being the former school teacher, I'll say to these software, I say, listen, I know you know how to code. I really don't care though. What does empiricism mean to you? Do you know what I mean? What does what does inspecting adapt mean to you? Those types of things. I'm curious, what is the normal persona, for lack of a better term, for a student in your classroom? Are these more business majors? Are these more software engineering majors? A little bit of both.
Great question. It's a little bit of everything. I've had program managers, product managers. You've had business analysts, right? Sort of on the market-facing folks.
Yeah.
Then you have lots of developers, and you've got such a wide range from each of the colleges. It's open to the whole university. So we get some Tepper folks. We get some folks from the engineering groups. And because of that, we don't want to try the class. We don't want to teach the class in a way that it tries to appease everybody in their specialization. We're trying to teach that cross-discipline nature, right? T-shaped people is really important in the future of workforce.
Yeah, the cross-discipline stuff is important because I'm assuming you have to teach the market-facing folks. There is a little bit of background here from a technical perspective that you need to know in order to be able to have productive conversations with the technical folks. And for the technical folks, you have to tell them, guess what? You have to be a little bit more market-facing because if you don't understand the business need,
absolutely,
you're going to have a bunch of problems. No one cares about your automated tests. There is one customer that cares about it.
There's so much fun
all.
To take, though, right?
That's not the end. That's a means to the end. Right?
Exactly.
It might get you there.
Necessary, but
where
insufficient.
Are we going? Insufficient, yes.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit. Like, what do you is that? I'm assuming some folks are more open to that than others because. Sometimes the market people think this is my thing. I don't need to worry about the rest of that stuff from a technical perspective. And with the technical people, it's like, I just want to code, man. Like, why are you,
leave me alone. I just want to code.
I just want to go code. Yeah.
It shows up because when we form they self-organize into teams. We give them some basic boundaries for action, right? You have to work with cross-disciplinary people, maybe 5 to 6 people at most, so that we can manage a classroom of 55. And we give them some basic rules to follow there about how to divide up. Well, once they do that, the people that are in that camp, if you will, or who have that experience and don't understand this new way, it shows up right away in every exercise that we go through. And I can't think of a great example for here, but it's powerful moments for them because it almost, to some of them, feels like we're setting some kind of trap.
Yeah,
because the traditional way of working is just so ingrained, even if you're brand new to industry and you only have a couple years of experience. So we show a radically different version of what the right responses might be in this new world.
Yeah.
So developers show up and say, well, of course we would need requirements. Okay, where do you get those? And you just start taking them down the line of critical thinking to get them to answer their own questions. And they discover that maybe we should just talk to the person next to us who happens to be the user or the product manager and ask those questions. You don't have people as an intermediary to you or a proxy to those people. Just go ask them. Show them some things. Show them your ideas and get their feedback.
Makes sense.
It's fundamentally, it's maybe counterintuitive to a lot of people, I guess.
I think it is. Just to kind of throw you somewhat of a curveball here.
Shoot.
I think the one thing I want to make sure that we're clear with all of our listeners here is, Agile is not a panacea. It's not.
Oh, come on! Tell us it solves all of our problems all the time.
It's not going to come in and solve all of our problems all the time, right? And I think if you're sitting here and if maybe you're like a manager in a company and you're listening to all this stuff and you think this is all great, I would say, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this, John. I would say if you don't have trust in your organization, don't try and do this because you will fail. So what do I mean by that? You have to have trust both ways. You have to have trust from the people above you in your organization. You have to have trust from people below you in your organization. If you don't have trust working both ways, just keep on doing what you're doing.
It'll become immediately
This will be
apparent, too.
very,
Well,
very messy.
Yeah. That's a key takeaway then, that you got to be ready for this. And you can't just go willy-nilly and say, we're going to try this and see what happens, because it opens up a lot of minds and it gets emotions flowing, I think, to a certain degree, right?
Now it's kind of happening at either level. It's the teams are saying, hey, let's try to use something like Scrum or Kanban to get started and working a new way, and then it gets some visibility, and then the managers figure out, how do we invest in this? How do we do more of it? And then they realize there's culture work to do. There's a leadership gap.
Yeah.
The other side of it is the managers hear about this and they're wanting some kind of change, and they're the ones leading it. But then you have the development organization, and development, could be business analysts, developers, testers, and the like. They're approaching them saying, we want to change, but I think fundamentally it's a leadership challenge.
It is.
It just comes down to effective leadership to say, why are we doing this, and how do we do this together? How do we run some experiments to see what emerges? Let's be willing to change direction together.
It's going to get worse before it gets better.
It gets really hard. Really hard, yes.
Does like every consultation come with a box of Kleenex as well, too?
That's right.
There could be some crying involved. It's like therapy almost. You have a special couch
happened.
you can bring.
It's happened.
I think, like I said before, it requires a lot of trust because you are breaking down silos and how people work. It's not, let me do this thing and then hand it off to you, then I'm done with it. Instead, like you were talking before, John, it's T-shaped people. It's kind of breaking out of your comfort zone, and being able to do those types of things. But I think the market dictates this is how we have to do stuff nowadays. Like, it's just impossible.
I feel like you're going to get left behind if you don't at this point, because between the new technologies that are allowing us to create faster, I mean, you got to get in front of this thing.
And the bigger the company, the more challenging, obviously, it is, because the culture is strong. But when you have leadership at the higher levels turning over every few years as a reality, through reorganization, through promotion to take on more responsibility, it creates a little bit of a void or vacuum behind them, so things maybe go backwards or collapse in a little bit or revert. So I think in the mid-size and small companies, it's a staying force. Once they get some success with it, they build on it, and they're more committed to it.
But my whole thing is, with my love for startup companies, I mean, I come across so many startups, like day in and day out, and you can just see how perilous that's going to be. And I feel like if they're thinking about these types of methodologies early on, just across all different types of ways of doing business, that they have a better chance of succeeding somehow. Sure. I think they're being more honest with themselves, and they're not creating these silos and some of these hierarchies that tend to stifle innovation, stifle you from actually communicating to your customers. Because I think a lot of times people get really stuck thinking, oh, I know what they want. I've developed this great feature, and then people are going to love it. But you don't know that unless you can really get it out there and test it and go through the steps.
Absolutely. So, and I was going to say, Wes Lyons was here, right, not too long ago, and I love what he's doing with K-Crew Square. I'm a baker fan in general, so I like to taste the cupcakes. I love what he's doing with the kids, but he said something, if I remember, about lifelong learners, right? Yeah. And that came up in your conversation, and to me, that's really important. People like myself, there's lots of us in Pittsburgh helping people learn how to learn. We've forgotten how to learn. We've forgotten to be curious. It's been made unsafe to try things outside the boundary of acceptable. So there's an element of leadership that can restore that kind of an environment.
Absolutely.
But I think with lifelong learners, it's got to be part of the culture. If you can't try different things along the way and learn from them, if it's expected to be right, like the math problem, the math teacher
right the first time, exactly.
You're setting yourself up for failure.
And once you failed, you're done forever.
Right.
You're relegated to Votech school at that point. So, you have a career of woodworking right in front of you forever.
That is the culture. Like, I've got stability. I know this one programming language versus a culture of the developers at free markets back in the late 90s all the way to the developers at Single Source that I'm working with right now, like they embrace, we've got so many technologies.
Yep. Remember back in the
it's
day?
Okay.
Remember back in the day when
actually
someone
competitive to know them, right?
Remember back in the day when someone was like, "Yeah, I know Cold Fusion, baby," and that's going to carry them for like their entire career. It's like, no, you should know all things programming, right? It's
They were like Power Builder and what
crazy
else were they?
things.
Small Tie. I can't remember. What
But yeah,
Delphi. It was Delphi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the idea that like you always got to keep your mind open and realize that, man, you got to keep moving forward. So, this is just, I think, such a fascinating conversation. I mean, to John Davis, I mean, you're super. It's enlightening us here. Plus, Jason, I just realized we had at least one listener of our first podcast with Wes Lyons. So I'm calling that a success. And this guy listened to it.
We could get two.
How about that? Yeah.
So guest by guest, we're going to build this show.
Yes.
So I think by 3 years from now, we're going to have like 22 listeners. So
we keep
very
on this
excited.
exponential. Yeah.
No, seriously, we want to keep having these types of conversations.
It's a great show.
And it's just a great way to sit back and just learn what you're up to. And this is what's making companies great these days, is bringing these types of methodologies in. If people want to learn more about you, John Davis, where can they go and check you out? Just search out on LinkedIn?
I'd say on LinkedIn. Pittsburgh's a small town, birds of a feather, right? We're all LinkedIn somewhere with each other, or Kevin Bacon or whatever. But yeah, I'd say definitely on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Is there anything we didn't cover that you think our listeners should glean from our conversation here?
Yeah, the only other thing I can think of is look around you. The industry you're in, the companies around the Pittsburgh area. But I mean, I'm meeting folks like in the military. John McCaskill, he's a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
He's actually bringing Scrum and Agile design thinking and mindfulness to the Navy and helping people become more effective in their organization and be happier.
Whoa,
and
back up.
He's like, his mind's blown, right? He's getting these great results as he explores this in practice with those people, and he's building a consulting company to get out there on his own someday.
Definitely.
He's a transitioning SEAL, so good for him. But, this stuff is everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere.
It is, and I love being able to talk about it. That's why, Jason, I'm glad I'm hanging out with you, because you're bringing this.
We need to teach more of this in the high schools
here,
and middle schools.
We do.
My kids are always on me about it.
Well, that's one thing I was going to ask you about, and we'll have to wrap this thing up, because, I mean, we could talk about this forever, but the idea is, at what point do we bring this into students? Like, so my nephew, who is in the 7th grade, I mean, he has a design class. And I'm like, I didn't have a design class in the 7th grade in 1985. I was going to geometry and social studies, and they told me that was it. And I'm like, and meanwhile, his dad, he was a designer by trade, is like all excited. I'm thinking, man, like, so I don't know, I just love seeing kids getting these different types of, it's not just the traditional stuff that I'm, it's been 40 years since I've been in school. It's just like, oh, goodness, man, the world has definitely moved, I think, in a better direction, but it can keep moving in an even better direction. So when do we start teaching this to kids?
That's a great question, Jason. You're trying to figure that out.
Yeah. I think there's stuff at a high level. Like, when do you teach kids that it's okay to not get the right answer the first time? When do you teach kids how to collaborate and work in a group? That's been going on for a while now, 21st century skills. And schools have really done a great job adopting to that more. If you walk into most schools nowadays, you won't see kids sitting in rows.
Yeah.
It's like cafe seating.
It looks like Starbucks, yeah, no doubt. So there's a lot of that going on right now. One of my pet peeves is we don't really know why we're doing that. We're just kind of doing it. We see cool offices like the Pittsburgh Tech Council laid out like this. I want to make my classroom look like that.
Great space.
But why are we trying to do that? Because we're trying to teach kids, we're trying to make them comfortable so they can feel empowered, so they can go off and they can be very creative and innovative. So we have to do more in that. We have to do more in that space. We have to do a lot more, though, just teaching kids how do you create a product. I think a class that needs to be in schools right now is just that entrepreneurial class. Because what you find out is, because what we haven't even touched upon along those lines is, I know how to make a great product and I have a great idea, but how to make a business plan so I can get it funded.
Yeah, how can you actually have someone buy it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff there that we need to be able to wrap our heads around a little bit. But I think the good news is like I said, in the last 10 years, you've seen schools move more towards this idea of creativity and innovation in the schools. So how do we do that? And honestly, a lot of that came from the parents.
Okay, they're driving that.
Yeah, in 2001, No Child Left Behind was passed. And the push behind No Child Left Behind was, we want to make sure that kids meet proficiency in these benchmarks. And the benchmarks went up every year. And then what ended up happening, because I saw this live, it's when I was teaching the classroom, is the parents would come in and say, okay, great, they know this stuff, but I want them to know more than that. I want them to be creative. I want them to be innovative. So they have this base of knowledge, but what can they actually do with it? So the parents really started pushing this idea of I want my kids to be creative and innovative, and the schools adopted to that. And we see that more and more, and I think the next logical step is the stuff that we're talking about now.
That's why we have so many more conversations to bring you. Keep stopping back and download more Emerge. Hanging out with Jason McKenna from RoboMatter, and this is Jonathan Kirsting from the Pittsburgh Technology Council at the Huntington Bank Tech Vibe Radio podcast studio. Too much fun, man. I love these conversations. And John, pleasure hanging out with you.
Great to meet you.
And I cannot wait to cut that loaf of bread open. I'm starving.
If it's still there.
If it's still there.
It better be. I'm counting on it, man.
Awesome.
Great stuff, everybody. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you both.